Jake Throttle Maddox thought it was just another Wednesday afternoon school pickup, expecting his babysitter to text him when his daughter was home safe. What he found instead would change everything. 3:41 p.m. on an October afternoon in Cooperstown. Jake stood in his garage working on a carburetor when his phone rang. The babysitter's voice, panicked, crying, said 4 words that stopped his heart. Your daughter almost died. For 7 months, one teenage girl had been surviving on Cooperstown's streets, sleeping behind a closed farm supply store, walking on a stress fracture that had never healed. But what happened in the 2.3 seconds it took her to reach Cora Maddox would expose a system that had erased 17 children from official records. And that's the part nobody saw coming. If those words hit you the way they hit me, subscribe, because this story is only just beginning. Drop your city in the comments, and stay with me. Is the little girl okay? The words came out barely above a whisper. Nora Jean Calloway couldn't see clearly. Everything was blurred and spinning. Her left shoulder screamed where the truck's mirror had clipped it. Her head throbbed where it had hit the pavement. The stress fracture in her left foot that she'd been walking on for weeks had finally snapped completely on impact. But none of that mattered, because 8 feet away, sitting on the curb with a babysitter who'd been too distracted to notice danger, was the little girl in the pink jacket, the one Nora had reached in 11 feet and 2.3 seconds, the one Nora had wrapped in her arms and twisted her body to shield when the dark gray Ford F250 came around that bend, doing 41 miles per hour in a 25 zone. The little girl was crying, but she was uninjured. Nora had made sure of that. Wednesday afternoon, October, in upstate New York. Corner of Birchfield Avenue and Route 9. The kind of small-town intersection where everyone knows everyone's cars, and nobody expects tragedy. Nora had been standing there for 16 minutes before it happened. Visible, but invisible. The way she'd learned to be over 7 months of homelessness. The oversized men's flannel shirt, olive green, 2 buttons missing, sleeves rolled 4 times, did almost nothing against the 41-degree cold. The gray canvas sneakers with the right sole separating at the toe, held together with packaging tape, squeaked slightly every time she shifted her weight off the fractured foot. 91 pounds at 5'3". 16 years old, but easily mistaken for 13, because starvation makes you smaller, makes you disappear. She'd already been rejected 4 times that afternoon. The young mother with the stroller who'd pulled to the far edge of the sidewalk when passing Nora, putting her body between the baby and this homeless teenager, like Nora carried disease. The hardware store owner, 60-something, standing in Dempsey's doorway, who'd said, "We're not a public facility, there's a gas station 2 miles out," when Nora asked to fill her water bottle from their tap. The 2 teenage girls from Cooperstown High walking past, one saying loudly to the other, "That's the girl who sleeps behind Braddock's. My dad says the town should do something." Never speaking to Nora directly, discussing her like a problem needing removal. But the 4th rejection, that one had been different. The deacon from First Methodist, the same man who'd given Nora soup 6 weeks ago, who'd sat with her for 20 minutes talking about God's love and community care. Today, he was with 2 church board members. Today, he stopped, looked at Nora, and said, loud enough for other pedestrians to hear, "Young lady, I've spoken to the pastor about this. We can help you find the right resources, but we can't have you using this street as a regular spot. It's not good for the community, and honestly, it's not what God would want for you either." 6 weeks ago, soup. Today, an inconvenience. Nora had nodded. said nothing, moved 10 feet down the sidewalk to make him more comfortable. That's where she was standing when 8-year-old Cora Maddox's red ball bounced into the street. Cora, wearing her father's Hells Angels leather jacket because she'd begged to wear it to school, and Jake had laughed and said, "Looks better on you anyway, kiddo," chased the ball without looking. Her babysitter Kayla was 30 feet behind, phone in hand, not paying attention. The dark gray Ford F250 rounded the bend. Dennis Allen Hargrove, 44 years old. County Road Supervisor, Otsego County. Wire-rimmed glasses. Reddish complexion from years of outdoor work. 19 years of employment with 3 prior speeding citations, all reduced through his union. Volunteer fire auxiliary member who hadn't attended training in 2 years, but kept the title anyway. Dennis didn't see Cora. Cora didn't see the truck. Nora did. 11 feet separated them, the wrong side of the sidewalk. Nora was already moving before her brain finished calculating whether she could make it. The stress fracture didn't matter. The malnutrition didn't matter. What mattered was that a child was about to die. Nora's sneakers scraped concrete, that distinctive sound, worn sole against rough pavement, as she launched forward. 3 steps. 4. She hit Cora at full speed, wrapped both arms around the girl's small body, and twisted. The truck's side mirror clipped Nora's left shoulder. Physics did the rest. The impact spun Nora. She hit the pavement on her left side, shoulder, hip, head. The stress fracture that had been a hairline crack became a complete break. The composition notebook in her backpack, 67% full of observations she'd been recording for 7 months, stayed with her through the fall. Cora, wrapped in Nora's arms, hit nothing but Nora. Cora was crying, frightened, but completely uninjured. Nora was on the pavement, eyes closed, blood pooling beneath her head from a 3-inch scalp laceration. Left shoulder visibly separated, left foot at an angle that made Kayla turn away and gag, not moving. Dennis Hargrove drove another 40 feet before his brain processed what happened. He stopped, got out, looked back at the scene. The girl on the pavement, the crowd forming, the phones already out and recording. He got back in his truck and drove away. What Dennis didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known in that moment, was that the little girl he'd almost killed was the daughter of a man who would mobilize 163 brothers in less than 3 hours. But first, for 9 minutes, Nora lay on that pavement. 30 people formed a circle around her. Phones out, recording, watching through screens. Nobody knelt. Nobody put pressure on the bleeding scalp wound. Nobody covered her against the 41-degree cold. One person called 911. That was it. For 9 minutes, a 16-year-old girl who'd just saved a stranger's child bled on Cooperstown's Main Street while an audience documented her suffering. Until one man pushed through the crowd, dropped to his knees beside Nora, and used his jacket, his Hells Angels cut, as pressure on the wound. Jake Maddox had arrived 7 minutes after the call. Cora was sitting on the curb with Kayla, crying but physically fine. And 8 feet away was this girl, this child, on the pavement, blood matting her hair, wearing clothes that should have told everyone exactly how desperate her situation was. Jake didn't hesitate. He knelt, applied pressure, spoke softly. "Stay with me. Ambulance is coming. You saved my daughter. Stay awake, okay?" That's when Nora's eyes opened. Unfocused. Gray eyes with that particular stillness of someone who's learned to read danger fast. She didn't know who this man was. She didn't know the child she'd saved belonged to him. She whispered 6 words that would echo in Jake's mind for months. "Is the little girl okay?" Jake's throat tightened. This girl was bleeding, broken, freezing, and her first thought was whether the child she'd saved had survived. "She's safe. She's right here. You saved her." Nora's eyes drifted closed again. Jake kept pressure on the wound, kept talking to her, kept her conscious until the ambulance arrived at 3:52 p.m. 11 minutes after impact, the paramedics loaded Nora carefully. Backboard. C-collar. IV started immediately because she was showing signs of shock and hypothermia. They found no ID, no phone, just a worn backpack with a composition notebook inside. Jake rode with her. Cora and Kayla followed in his truck. And while the ambulance was still 3 miles from Bassett Medical Center, Jake made a phone call. "Marcus, it's Jake. I need every brother within 50 miles at Bassett Medical. Now." A pause. Then, "What's going on?" "Homeless kid saved Cora from getting hit by a truck. Took the impact herself. She's torn up pretty bad, Marcus. 16 years old, 90 pounds, no ID, nobody with her. And the driver," Jake's voice went hard, "the driver fled the scene. Marcus Reaper Dalton, Sergeant-at-Arms of the Cooperstown chapter, was doing maintenance on a prospect's bike when the call came. The wrench went down immediately. Say no more. We're coming." The line went dead. And that was it. No questions about proof or evidence. No concerns about legal complications. Just immediate action, because that's what Brotherhood meant. Marcus called the chapter president next. "Congregation, it's Marcus. Talk to me. Homeless kid, 16 years old, saved Jake's daughter from getting hit by a truck. Took the impact herself. She's torn up bad. No family, no ID, nobody looking for her. And the driver fled the scene." Silence for exactly 3 seconds. Then Thomas, Congregation Voss, 61, retired family court judge, 17 years on the bench, said 2 words. "Code Fallen Youth." That code hadn't been used in 4 years. It meant one thing: drop everything, everyone responds, no exceptions. "I'm calling Utica. We're bringing everyone." The line went dead. And that was it. No debate. No questions about evidence or legal complications. Just immediate action. By 4:14 p.m., the calls were going out across Otsego County. Brothers at work left their shifts. Brothers having dinner left their meals. Brothers 2 towns over fired up their bikes and headed toward Cooperstown. The rumble started 20 minutes later. Low and distant at first, like thunder rolling across the hills. Then building, growing, becoming something that shook windows and set off car alarms 3 blocks away. 61 riders from Cooperstown converged on Route 9. Not racing, not reckless, moving with the disciplined coordination of men who'd ridden together for years. Formation tight, engines synchronized. 23 miles north, the Utica chapter mobilized. 102 riders. The VP made one announcement in their clubhouse. "Cooperstown needs us. Fallen youth. Every available rider rolls in 5 minutes." They rolled in 4. By 5:47 p.m., 163 motorcycles were moving through upstate New York toward one hospital. The largest single mobilization in the chapter's history. For a 16-year-old girl, most of them had never met. For a child who'd saved a brother's daughter. For someone who'd been invisible for 7 months, until the moment she decided a stranger's life mattered more than her own safety. The formation approached Bassett Medical Center like a storm. Chrome gleaming under the October sun. Leather cuts bearing the same insignia. men ranging from their mid-30s to late 60s. They parked in coordinated waves. Row after row after row. Shut off engines almost simultaneously, 163 bikes falling silent in a matter of seconds. The sudden quiet, after all that thunder, felt heavy. Expectant. Hospital security called the police immediately. The police arrived, took one look at the formation, disciplined, peaceful, overwhelming, and made a calculation. 163 motorcycles. The largest single mobilization in the chapter's history. And none of them knew yet about the composition notebook. None of them knew about the sister named Abby. None of them knew about Constance Ruth Merrill and the 17 children who'd disappeared from her facility's records. But they would. Nora regained full consciousness in the emergency room at 5:23 p.m. Bright lights. Antiseptic smell. Beeping monitors. A nurse checking her IV. A doctor writing on a clipboard. And sitting in the chair beside her bed, this massive man in a leather vest covered in patches, gray beard, scar across his left eyebrow, dog tags visible, was someone Nora had never seen before. Marcus Reaper Dalton, 6'3", 240 pounds, the kind of presence that made most people cross the street to avoid him. He looked at Nora. She looked back. Neither spoke for a moment. Then Marcus leaned forward, pulled a notepad from his vest pocket, and said in a voice that was surprisingly gentle, "My name's Marcus. You saved my brother's daughter today. That makes you family. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer honestly because we're about to help you whether you think you need it or not. First question. What's your name?" Nora's throat was dry. The IV fluids hadn't reached her yet. She managed one word. Nora. Nora what? Calloway. Marcus wrote it down. How old are you, Nora? 16. Where are your parents? My mom died 7 months ago. Heart condition, no warning. My dad left when I was 3. Marcus nodded, kept writing. You got any siblings? And that's when Nora's eyes filled, the first real emotion breaking through the shock and exhaustion. I have a sister, Abby. She's 9. The foster system split us up after Mom died. They sent her to Albany, sent me to a group home 40 miles away. The director wouldn't let me contact her, said it was for adjustment purposes. I tried 3 times through official channels, all denied. Marcus's pen stopped moving. His jaw tightened. What happened then? I left. 6 weeks into placement. I'd rather be homeless than trapped somewhere they won't let me reach my sister. I've been in Cooperstown ever since. It's close to where we used to live. Close to familiar. Marcus wrote every word. Then, the group home you left, what was it called? Pathway Youth Group Home. Herkimer County. Run by a woman named Constance Merrill. Marcus didn't react visibly, but something shifted in his expression. Because he knew that name. Everyone in New York foster care advocacy knew that name. Nora, I need to ask you something important. Do you have any documentation? Any records of what happened? Anything written down? Nora looked at her backpack on the chair. The nurses had kept it with her. My notebook, it's in there. I've been writing things down. About Pathway. About Merrill. About the other kids who ran. I didn't know what else to do with it. I was just documenting, in case someone ever asked. Marcus stood, retrieved the backpack, pulled out the composition notebook. Worn cover, pages bent from months in a backpack, 2/3 full of Nora's careful handwriting. He opened to a random page, read 3 lines, closed it. Nora, this notebook doesn't leave this room without me making copies first. And your sister Abby, She's going to know you've been looking for her. That's the first call we make. The second call finds the man who drove away. We'll work from there. But first..." He pulled a chair close, sat down, turned his notepad so she could read it. Her name. Abby's name. A list of action items with check boxes. He handed her the pen. "Anything I missed?" Nora stared at the list. At this man who'd walked into her hospital room and immediately started solving problems instead of asking if she deserved help. Her hand shook as she took the pen. She added one line. "Find the other kids who ran." Marcus read it, nodded once. "That's exactly what we're gonna do." By 6 p.m., the parking lot at Bassett Medical Center looked like a rally. 163 motorcycles lined up in perfect formation, chrome gleaming under the hospital's floodlights, leather cuts bearing the same insignia. Men ranging from their mid-30s to late 60s, standing in disciplined rows. The rumble had started 20 minutes earlier, low and distant, like thunder rolling across the Otsego County hills. Then it grew into a roar that shook windows 3 blocks away and set off car alarms in the hospital parking garage. 163 engines roaring in unison. A deafening, beautiful thunder that announced exactly one thing. Someone had called for help, and help had arrived. They parked in coordinated waves, shut off engines almost simultaneously. The sudden silence after all that noise felt heavy and expectant. Hospital security called the police. The police arrived, took one look at the formation, and made a calculation. No weapons visible. No threatening behavior. Just presence. Overwhelming, undeniable presence. The shift supervisor, a woman named Captain Ellen Vasquez, who'd worked Cooperstown PD for 19 years, walked up to Marcus Reaper as he stood near the hospital entrance. "We got a call about intimidation." Marcus handed her a business card. "Sergeant-at-Arms, Cooperstown Chapter. We're here supporting a minor who was injured saving a child. No intimidation, just family." Ellen looked at the card, looked at the formation behind him, made a decision. "Keep it peaceful." "That's the only way we operate, Captain." Now, you might be thinking, 163 Hell's Angels show up at a hospital, and the first thing they do is have a polite conversation with police? That's not the story you expected, is it? Everyone expected chaos, fists ready, demands, threats. Instead, what happened over the next 6 hours was something closer to a military operation. Because Marcus Reaper didn't just mobilize brothers, he mobilized specialists. Edward Ironside Kaplan, 57, was the first one Marcus called after congregation. 24-year corrections officer, Attica, then Mohawk Correctional Facility. Strategic, methodical, had worked alongside CPS investigators before and knew exactly how facility directors hide billing fraud. Shepard arrived at 6:14 p.m., 54 years old. Licensed clinical social worker with 19 years in New York State foster care advocacy. The one Marcus called specifically because when he heard the name Constance Merrill, Shepard's response was quiet and precise. "I've been waiting for someone to get her on paper." Chalk, retired Otsego County Sheriff's investigator, 57, 22 years on the job, handled evidence. He arrived with his old field kit, which technically he wasn't supposed to still have, but nobody was going to argue about it now. Signal, 43, cybersecurity specialist, former NSA contractor, was already at his laptop in the hospital cafeteria by 6:30 p.m. He had 3 Ring camera feeds pulled up and was building a timeline. And Doc, 69, combat medic from Da Nang, 1969 to 1971, was the one who sat in the hallway outside Nora's room that first night, quietly reading her chart when the nurses weren't looking, making sure the malnutrition protocols were being followed correctly. This wasn't a mob. This was a task force. Marcus sat down with Nora at 7:15 p.m. She'd been moved to a private room. Left leg immobilized in a temporary cast until surgery could happen. Left shoulder in a sling. 3 staples in her scalp. IV fluids running because she was severely dehydrated on top of everything else. Marcus opened the composition notebook to the first page. I'm going to read this. All of it. And you're going to tell me if there's anything in here that needs clarification. Then we're going to make copies. 1 stays with you, 1 goes to the proper authorities. 1 stays with us. Because what you documented here, it's evidence. Nora nodded. Marcus began reading aloud, not performing. Just reading her words in a steady, clear voice that gave them the weight they deserved. Entry from 6 months ago. Heard Meryl on the phone through the wall tonight. She said, "The Albany girl has been reclassified. New placement pending. We don't have to facilitate contact from the sister. If she calls again, we route to the main line and no one picks up. We're not obligated past initial placement." Then she laughed. She said, "The runaways don't come back. They never come back. That's the system working as designed." Marcus stopped, looked at Shepard, who'd come into the room to listen. Shepard's expression was dark. That's conspiracy to obstruct. And if she's billing for kids who aren't there— She is, Nora said quietly. I saw the ledger once, on her desk. I shouldn't have been in her office, but I was looking for Abby's file. The numbers didn't match. She had 17 kids listed as residents who I'd never seen. Shepard pulled out his own notebook. 17. You're sure? I wrote down the names. They're on page 43. Marcus flipped to page 43. Read the list. 17 names. 17 children classified as voluntary abandonment, who had simply disappeared from Pathway's records. 1 name jumped out. Jordan T. Avery. Age 15 at disappearance. Timeline: left Pathway in 2021. Shepard knew that name, too. Jordan's aunt filed a missing persons report. It got kicked back to Pathway, who confirmed voluntary abandonment. Case closed. Jordan was never found. Marcus wrote that down. So we have a pattern. Meryl separates siblings, makes contact impossible. Kids run because they're desperate. Meryl classifies them as voluntary abandonment and keeps billing the state. Correct, Shepard said. At $4,300 per month per child, if she billed for Nora for 3 months after Nora left, that's $12,900 in fraud. Multiply that across 17 kids with varying timelines. We're looking at over $200,000 in false billing, Ironside finished. He'd come in during the reading. And that's assuming conservative estimates. If any of those kids were long-term disappearances, the numbers get worse. Marcus closed the notebook, looked at Nora. You documented a crime. Potentially 17 crimes. Maybe more. This notebook is going to break this case wide open. Nora's voice was small. I just wanted someone to know. I didn't think anyone would care. We care. And now we have proof. While Marcus was reading Nora's notebook, Chalk was 3 miles away at the corner of Birchfield and Route 9, the impact site. The police had photographed the scene but hadn't processed it thoroughly. They'd classified it as an accident investigation, not a hit and run yet, because nobody had confirmed the driver fled. Kayla, the babysitter, was too shaken to give clear details. The crowd had dispersed, but Chalk knew what to look for. The side mirror fragment was still there, plastic casing, paint transfer, sitting 8 feet from the impact point where it had sheared off. Chalk photographed it from 6 angles, documented the position, collected it in an evidence bag using gloves he'd brought from home. The tire tracks were still visible too. Emergency braking pattern: 40 feet of rubber on asphalt before the driver stopped. Then clean tracks where the truck pulled away. Chalk photographed those, measured them, took paint samples from the mirror fragment. By 7:45 p.m., he had a preliminary match on the mirror. 2019 Ford F-250. Aftermarket replacement mirror sold at 3 auto parts stores in Otsego County. Signal was already cross-referencing vehicle registrations. 23 F-250s registered locally. He narrowed it to vehicles with the correct mirror type. Pulled DMV photos. One name came up with a hit: Dennis Allen Hargrove, county employee. 3 prior speeding citations. Home address: 847 Maple Ridge Drive. Signal pulled property records, tax information, employment history, criminal background, clean, union membership, active. But the Ring camera footage was the clincher. Signal had accessed 3 cameras on Route 9. The first showed Dennis's truck approaching the intersection at 3:41 p.m., clearly over the speed limit. The second captured the impact. Blurry, but you could see Nora reaching Cora, see the truck's mirror make contact, see Dennis brake, stop, then leave. The third camera, 3 doors down from the scene, captured Dennis driving past again 22 minutes later. Slowing down, looking at the scene, then accelerating away. That meant he came back, saw what he'd done, and left again. Signal burned the footage to 3 separate drives, one for police, one for the chapter, one backup. By 8:30 p.m., they had Dennis Hargrove's full profile. What they needed now were witnesses. Gary Sutcliffe had been across the street when it happened. 67. Retired postal worker. He'd seen the whole thing. Hadn't filmed, hadn't helped initially. But the guilt had been eating at him for 4 hours. When 2 brothers knocked on his door at 8:47 p.m., respectfully, quietly, no intimidation, Gary opened immediately. "I know why you're here. Come in." They sat in Gary's living room. He gave them his statement without prompting. "I was coming out of the pharmacy when I heard tires squealing. Looked up and saw that girl, the homeless girl who's been around town running, just running full speed. She hit that little girl like a linebacker, wrapped around her, spun them both. The truck's mirror caught her shoulder. She went down hard." "You saw the truck?" "Dark gray F-250. I'm good with vehicles. Was a mail carrier for 37 years. You learn to recognize cars." The driver stopped, got out, looked back, then got in and drove off. "Did you see the license plate?" "Partial. New York. Started with HGD. That's all I got before he was gone." "Why didn't you help the girl?" Gary's hands shook. His voice broke. "I don't know, I just froze. Stood there like everyone else with a phone out. I've been ashamed of what I didn't do ever since. When I heard you were looking for witnesses, I wanted to do this right, tell you everything." They took his statement, documented it, thanked him. "You're doing the right thing now, Mr. Sutcliffe." "Too late doesn't feel like the right thing, but it's all I got." Helen Morrow, 71, retired school librarian, had been inside Dempsey's Hardware. She heard the impact, came outside, was the first adult to speak to Cora. Her testimony placed Dennis's truck at the scene with precision. She'd seen the county logo on the door before it drove away. County vehicles have specific markings. That detail mattered. James Okafor, 54, veterinarian from Cooperstown Veterinary Clinic, had been the only bystander who tried to assess Nora's injuries before the ambulance arrived. He provided medical detail about the 9-minute delay. "I checked for breathing, pulse, bleeding. She had a scalp laceration actively bleeding, shoulder visibly displaced, leg at a wrong angle. She needed immediate pressure on that head wound. I tried to get people to help. Nobody moved. I finally got one woman to give me her jacket, but 9 minutes with an actively bleeding head wound in 41-degree weather for a girl who was already malnourished. That's borderline neglectful. And then there was Sandra Kowalski. 63. Former social worker, Otsego County DSS, retired after 29 years watching the system fail kids. She'd been driving past, stopped, saw the crowd filming. She was the one who'd yelled, "Someone get their jacket off, now!" Nobody had. She'd taken hers off, given it to the homeless girl bleeding on the pavement. When Signal and Shepard knocked on her door at 9:22 p.m., Sandra answered already wearing her coat. "I've been waiting for someone to ask questions. Come in." They sat. She didn't wait for prompts. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw that girl. Not just the impact. I saw her before. Weeks ago. Same spot, same clothes, same look of someone who's been failed by every system designed to catch her. I called the CPS hotline 5 weeks ago, gave her description. Location. Said she looked like a runaway minor. They said they'd send someone. Far as I know, nobody came. Shepard wrote that down. "You called CPS directly?" "I called the hotline, got a case number, followed up 2 weeks later. They said the case had been addressed, but couldn't give me details. I drove past that corner 3 times after. She was still there." So the system knew. The system knew. The system didn't care. Because here's what I learned in 29 years doing this work. Runaway youth are considered self-resolving problems. They either come back into care or they disappear. Either way, they're off the caseload. Nobody's required to look too hard. Sandra's voice hardened. But when I saw that girl on the pavement today, saw her sacrifice herself for a stranger's child while 30 people filmed, I knew exactly what was happening. The same community that ignored her for months suddenly had content. That's when I decided I was done being quiet. So yes, I'll testify. I'll give you names. I'll burn every bridge I have left in this county's social services if it means that girl gets justice. Shepard looked at her for a long moment. Then, "We're going to need you. All of it. Names, case numbers, documentation of your calls. Because what you just described, that's systemic negligence." "I have files," Sandra said. "Everything I kept when I retired, cases that bothered me, kids who fell through cracks, including one from Pathway Youth Group Home 4 years ago, a girl who'd been classified as voluntary abandonment, facility director listed as Constance Merrill." The room went quiet. "Do you remember the name?" Sandra pulled out a file folder, handed it over. "Jordan Avery, age 15. Last seen at Pathway in 2021. Aunt filed missing persons. Case closed after Pathway confirmed voluntary abandonment. Jordan was never found." That was the second victim. The pattern. Merrill had been doing this for years. By 10 p.m., the pieces were assembled. Congregation called an emergency chapter meeting in the VFW hall. All 163 brothers present. He stood at the front, held up Nora's composition notebook. 17 names, 17 children who disappeared from one facility's records over 4 years, classified as voluntary abandonment. Never followed up, never found. And the director? Constance Merrill, kept billing the state for kids who weren't there. Estimated fraud, $219,000. The room was silent. "We have documentation. We have witness statements. We have evidence of the hit-and-run driver. And we have one 16-year-old girl who survived hell to write it all down because she hoped someone would care." Congregation looked around the room. "All in favor of pursuing this to the end. Full legal cooperation, full support for Nora, full investigation of pathway, say I. For a moment, nothing. Just the ticking of the clock on the wall and the distant sound of traffic outside. Then, not one voice, every voice. 163 men voting unanimously to help a girl they'd never met, because 17 children had disappeared. And nobody had looked. Until now. At 11:53 p.m., Dennis Allen Hargrove was in his driveway. He was washing his truck. The front right side mirror had been removed, sitting on his workbench in the garage. He was humming. Classic rock station playing through his phone speaker. The same truck that had almost killed an 8-year-old girl. The same hands that had fled the scene. Washing away evidence. When the New York State Police arrived, Captain Vasquez had escalated the case once she reviewed Signal's evidence package. Dennis looked up, confused, then annoyed, like a man interrupted during a normal evening. "Can I help you?" "Dennis Hargrove? Yeah? You're under arrest for leaving the scene of an accident causing serious injury, reckless endangerment, and failure to render aid." He tried to run. Made it 4 steps before 2 troopers had him face down on his driveway, arms wrenched behind his back, Miranda rights read right there on the broken asphalt. "I didn't see anything. You can't prove I was there." But they could. The Ring camera footage, the mirror fragment with paint and fiber transfer, Gary Sutcliffe's partial plate matching Dennis's registration, Helen Morrow's description of the county vehicle markings. Dennis was arraigned at 9:17 a.m. the next morning. Charges: leaving the scene of an accident causing serious injury, reckless endangerment of a minor, failure to render aid, and tampering with evidence. Bail was set at $50,000. His union lawyer argued for reduction. The judge looked at the medical photos of Nora's injuries. Denied. The defendant fled twice. Once immediately after impact, once after returning to assess the scene. Bail stands. Dennis didn't make bail. Couldn't, because a county road supervisor making $68,000 a year doesn't have $50,000 liquid. He was remanded to Otsego County Jail pending trial. And while Dennis sat in a cell, Shepard was making calls. New York State Office of Children and Family Services. Financial Crimes Division. CPS Oversight. Inspector General's Office. By noon, Constance Merrill's facility was flagged for emergency audit. By 3 p.m., forensic accountants were reviewing 4 years of billing records. By 7 p.m., they'd found the discrepancies. $12,900 billed for Nora after she'd left. 17 other youth with similar patterns. Total false billing, $219,400. Constance Merrill was arrested at her home at 6:14 a.m. on Friday. Charges: Medicaid fraud, conspiracy to defraud, obstruction of child welfare investigations, and endangering the welfare of children. She was wearing her reading glasses, had been drinking coffee, eating toast. The same hands that had separated Nora from Abby, that had buried 17 children in paperwork. She looked up at the officers, confused, like she couldn't understand why they were there. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake, Ms. Merrill. You're under arrest." Her bail was set at $200,000. She didn't make it either. Because sometimes justice looks like 2 people in separate jails, both convinced they'd done nothing wrong, both facing years in prison for crimes they thought they'd gotten away with. Justice had been served. But justice wasn't the ending. It was only the beginning. Nora had surgery on her left leg 3 days after the incident. pins, and plates to reconstruct the fibula that had been cracked for weeks before finally shattering completely. Doc sat in the surgical waiting room with Jake and Cora. When the orthopedic surgeon came out, Doc asked the right questions: recovery timeline, physical therapy protocol, weight-bearing restrictions. 6 weeks non-weight-bearing, then progressive loading. Physical therapy 3 times weekly for 12 weeks. She should regain full function. And the malnutrition factor? Doc asked quietly. How does that affect bone healing? The surgeon's expression shifted. Significantly. She'll need nutritional support. High protein, calcium supplementation, vitamin D. Her body doesn't have the resources to heal efficiently right now. Doc nodded. We'll handle it. And they did. Shepard had already filed emergency paperwork. By Monday morning, Nora had a temporary guardian appointed, Sandra Kowalski, the former social worker who'd given Nora her jacket on the pavement. Sandra had spent 29 years watching the system fail kids. She wasn't about to let it fail Nora. The guardianship hearing took 11 minutes. The judge reviewed Nora's notebook, reviewed the charges against Merrill, looked at Sandra's background. Ms. Kowalski, you're aware this is a significant responsibility. Your Honor, I've been preparing for this responsibility for 29 years. I'm ready. Guardianship granted. Temporary status for 90 days, then we'll review for permanent placement. Sandra drove Nora to her house that afternoon, a small 2-bedroom ranch on Chestnut Street. The second bedroom had been Sandra's home office. By the time Nora arrived, it had been converted. Bed with clean sheets, desk, lamp, bookshelf, window with curtains that actually closed. Nora stood in the doorway, stared. This is mine? This is yours, for as long as you need it. Nora sat on the bed. The mattress didn't sag. The blanket was thick and warm. There was a pillow. Actual pillow. Not a backpack. For the first time in 7 months, Nora had a door that locked from the inside. That night, Sandra made dinner. Chicken, rice, vegetables. Portions appropriate for someone recovering from malnutrition. Small, frequent, gentle on a stomach that had been empty too long. Nora ate slowly, carefully, like someone who'd forgotten that food could be a regular occurrence. You don't have to save any for later, Sandra said gently. There's more. There will always be more. Nora's hand had moved unconsciously to her breast pocket, where the laminated photo of Abby lived. The photo was creased from 7 months of being carried. Abby at age 9, smiling, gap-toothed, holding a stuffed rabbit. Sandra noticed. You want to call her? Nora looked up. I can? We're going to do better than call. We're going to bring her here. Shepard had already located Abby. Foster placement in Albany with a family named Chen. The placement was stable. Abby was safe, healthy, attending school. But the separation had never been necessary. Never justified. Just Merrill's policy preference wrapped in bureaucratic language. Shepard filed for sibling reunification on Tuesday. Congregation, retired family court judge, made calls to colleagues still on the bench, explained the situation. Merrill's arrest, Nora's documentation, the systematic separation of siblings as administrative convenience. By Thursday, the Chen family had agreed to temporary visits. By the following Monday, the reunification plan was approved. 15 days after Nora saved Cora's life, a car pulled up to Sandra's house. Abby, 9 years old, dark hair in braids, wearing a purple jacket, got out. Nora was sitting on the porch, left leg in a cast, crutches beside her. She'd been waiting there for an hour, watching the street, afraid to believe it would actually happen. Abby saw her, froze, then ran. Nora stood, awkwardly, painfully, dropping one crutch, and caught her sister. They collided, held on, cried. "You found me," Abby sobbed. "I thought you forgot about me." "Never. I could never forget you. I was looking the whole time." Sandra stood at the door, watching. She'd seen a lot of reunifications in 29 years. Some joyful, some strained, some broken. This one was pure. The Chen family stayed for an hour, discussed the transition plan. Abby would visit weekends initially, then progressively longer stays, building toward full reunification pending permanent guardianship approval. But what mattered, what changed everything, was that the sisters could see each other, could talk, could know they hadn't been abandoned by each other, only by a system that had never prioritized their bond. While Nora was healing, the investigation into Pathway expanded. Signal worked with state investigators, cross-referenced billing records with facility logs, found the pattern Nora had documented. 17 children classified as voluntary abandonment over 4 years. Billing continued for an average of 3. 4 months after each child left. Jordan Avery's name was at the top of the list. Age 15. Disappeared 2021. Aunt had filed missing persons. Case closed after Pathway confirmed voluntary abandonment. Ironside and Chalk worked the cold case. Found Jordan's last known location, a bus station in Syracuse, 60 miles from Pathway. Security footage from 3 years ago, but it was archived. Jordan buying a ticket to Buffalo. That was the last confirmed sighting. The investigators traced forward. Found Jordan in a youth shelter in Buffalo 7 months after disappearance. Alive, working under the table at a restaurant. Staying invisible because going back into the system meant going back to Pathway. When investigators found Jordan, now 18, legally emancipated, and explained what Nora had documented, Jordan's response was quiet. "I kept thinking someone would ask questions. Nobody ever did. Someone's asking now." Of the 17 names on Nora's list, investigators eventually located 12. 3 were in other states. 4 were in shelters or transitional housing. 2 had aged out of the system entirely. 1 was in college, having hidden their past to survive. 5 remained missing. 5 children whose trails went cold, whose stories ended in question marks. But the investigation continued. Because Nora's notebook had opened a door that couldn't be closed. Dennis Hargrove's trial lasted 3 days. The evidence was overwhelming. Ring camera footage, mirror fragment with fiber transfer. Gary Sutcliffe's testimony, Helen Morrow's identification of the county vehicle, James Okafor's medical testimony about the delay in aid. The jury deliberated for 1 hour and 43 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing: 6 years in state prison, no parole eligibility for 4 years. Driver's license permanently revoked. Restitution ordered for medical expenses. Dennis's attorney tried to argue that it was an accident, that his client panicked. The judge looked at the medical photos of Nora's injuries, looked at the footage of Dennis returning to the scene, assessing, and leaving again. The accident was the impact. The crime was what came after. 6 years. Constance Merrill's trial took longer. Financial fraud cases always do, but the evidence was equally overwhelming. Billing records, Nora's testimony, Sandra's documentation of the CPS call that was never followed up, Jordan's testimony about Pathway's policies, and the 17 names, each one a child who'd been erased from documentation, classified as self-resolving, abandoned by design. The jury deliberated for 2 hours and 18 minutes. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing. 8 years in state prison, no parole eligibility for 5 years. Restitution ordered. $219,400 to the state. Professional license permanently revoked. Merrill tried to speak at sentencing. Tried to explain that she'd been following standard procedures, that voluntary abandonment was a recognized classification. The judge cut her off. You didn't follow procedures. You created a system where vulnerable children could disappear, and you profited from their absence. 8 years. And I hope you spend every day thinking about the 17 lives you treated as paperwork. Pathway Youth Group Home was shut down pending full investigation. The remaining residents were relocated to facilities with actual oversight. The building sat empty, windows dark, sign removed. A monument to institutional failure. 3 months after the incident, Nora was walking without crutches. Physical therapy 3 times weekly had rebuilt strength in her left leg. The pins and plates would stay permanently, but the orthopedic surgeon was pleased with her progress. You did the work. That's what matters. Nora had gained 23 pounds. Her frame finally looked 16 instead of 13. The dark circles under her eyes had faded. The stress fracture that had been her constant companion for months was now just a scar on an X-ray. She'd enrolled at Cooperstown High School in January, sophomore year, 2nd semester. It was terrifying, being around people her age, being visible instead of invisible, being a student instead of someone sleeping behind closed buildings. But Shepard had connected her with a school counselor who specialized in trauma. Twice weekly sessions. Learning that surviving isn't the same as living. Learning that she was allowed to take up space. Abby had moved in permanently by February. Full reunification approved. Sandra's guardianship made permanent. The sisters shared the 2nd bedroom now. Bunk beds, Abby's choice, because she wanted Nora close enough to talk to at night. Jake and Cora visited every week, brought dinner, stayed for movies. Cora had adopted Nora as an honorary big sister, followed her around, asked endless questions. Cora had been in therapy too, working through the trauma of the incident, the guilt of being the reason Nora got hurt. You didn't hurt me, Nora told her one evening. You gave me a reason to be brave. Really? Really. The chapter had raised $42,000. Collections from brothers across New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio. Some gave $20. Some gave $2,000. It didn't matter. What mattered was the number that appeared in the trust account established in Nora's name. This is for your future, congregation explained. College, trade school, housing, whatever you need to build the life you want. Nora stared at the bank statement. The number seemed impossible. I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it. Say you'll build something good from everything terrible you survived. 6 months after the incident, Cooperstown High School held a recognition ceremony. Nora had made honor roll. The first time in her academic life, she'd been in one place long enough to finish a full semester. The principal called her to the stage, read a citation, talked about resilience and courage and overcoming adversity. Nora stood there awkwardly, still not used to being seen, being celebrated, being told she mattered. But when she walked off the stage, 163 people stood. Brothers in leather cuts, filling the back rows of the auditorium. They'd come because Nora was family, because when one of them succeeded, they all showed up. The applause lasted 43 seconds, long enough for Nora to understand something fundamental. She wasn't invisible anymore. 1 year after the incident, Nora was 17, senior year at Cooperstown High, captain of the debate team, volunteering at a youth shelter in Utica, helping kids who'd run from bad placements, who were sleeping rough, who needed someone to tell them they weren't invisible. She carried her mother's memory, the CPR training Sarah had given her, the belief that you help people when you're the only one who can. And she carried something else, a brand new composition notebook. This one wasn't for documenting abuse, this one was for documenting hope. Stories of kids who got help, resources that actually worked, people who actually cared. The old notebook, the one with 17 names and Merrill's overheard conversations, had been submitted as evidence. A photocopy of the first page was framed and hung in the Cooperstown chapter's meeting room. Nora's handwriting, her observations, her refusal to let children be erased. Abby was 10 now, thriving, soccer team, art classes, slept through the night without nightmares, laughed easily. The gap-toothed smile now had braces. Sandra was still their guardian. Would be until Nora aged out. Had already started paperwork to adopt Abby permanently. The house on Chestnut Street smelled like home now. Coffee in the mornings, dinner every night, voices, laughter. The sound of Nora's footsteps, no longer that distinctive squeak of worn sneakers on pavement, but the solid steps of boots that fit properly, shoes that supported healing bones, a walk that no longer favored an old fracture. But this story isn't really about notebooks or court cases or brothers on motorcycles. It's about what happens when one person decides to act instead of watch. When courage looks like a 91-pound teenager running 11 feet in 2.3 seconds because a child is in danger. When sacrifice means wrapping your arms around a stranger and taking the impact yourself because letting them die isn't an option. And it's about what happens when the people society fears most turn out to be the gentlest protectors. When leather cuts and roaring engines become symbols of safety. When 163 men prove that family isn't blood. It's who shows up when you're bleeding on a sidewalk and everyone else is filming. Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. 30 people stood in a circle around a 16-year-old girl who'd just saved a child's life. 30 people with phones out. Recording, documenting, creating content. And for 9 minutes, nobody knelt. You've watched communities change over your lifetime. You've seen the instinct to help get replaced, slowly, imperceptibly, by the instinct to document and move on. You've felt that quiet grief, wondering when exactly it shifted. When stopping to help became inconvenient, when recording tragedy became more natural than touching it. Nora's story is proof that the instinct to protect is still there. It just needs someone to go first. Sandra Kowalski went first. Took off her jacket in 41-degree weather and gave it to a bleeding stranger. Jake Maddox went first. Knelt beside Nora and stayed there, applying pressure to her wound, refusing to leave. Gary Sutcliffe came forward later, ashamed he hadn't acted, determined to make it right. 30 people filmed. 3 people acted. Your generation knows which 3 mattered. If you've ever felt invisible, know this. You're not. Someone sees you. Maybe not today. Maybe not yet. But there are people who will mobilize the moment you come into focus, who will stand between you and harm, who'll give you their protection when the system gives you paperwork. There are Noras everywhere. Teenagers falling through cracks that administrators keep deliberately wide. Elderly people being financially exploited by the people who promised to care for them. Children suffering behind closed doors while neighbors convince themselves it's not their business. And most of the time, we don't see them because it's easier to look away. Because getting involved is messy. Because we're afraid of being wrong, of overstepping, of making things awkward. But here's what I've learned from Nora's story. You don't need 163 motorcycles to change someone's life. You need to pay attention when a teenager is wearing the same clothes for multiple days in weather that requires more. You need to ask uncomfortable questions when something feels wrong, not once, but persistently until someone listens. You need to believe the person who's trembling while telling you something impossible. You need to be the one who kneels instead of films. Listen when a child hesitates before answering, "How are things at home?" Notice when someone's losing weight they can't afford to lose. Question the stories that sound too perfect, the explanations that feel rehearsed. Care enough to intervene even if your voice shakes, even if you might be wrong, even if it's awkward. Because the only thing worse than being wrong about abuse is being right and doing nothing. Constance Merrill is serving year 2 of 8 in Bedford Hills Correctional. She'll be 66 when she's eligible for parole. Dennis Hargrove is serving year 1 of 6 in Mohawk Correctional. His county pension was suspended. His union dropped his membership after the conviction. The 17 children on Nora's list are being sought actively. 12 found. 5 still missing. But now there are people looking. Really looking. Not filing them as voluntary abandonment and moving on. And Nora Jean Calloway? She's 18 now, applying to colleges. Considering pre-med because her mother was a nurse, and Nora wants to carry that legacy forward. Or maybe social work, because Sandra showed her what it looks like to refuse to let kids be invisible. She still has nightmares sometimes, still flinches at sudden loud noises, still checks to make sure Abby's in the other bunk at night. But she's healing. Learning that trauma doesn't have to be the end of your story. It can be the beginning of someone else's salvation. She keeps the laminated photo of Abby, the one she carried for 7 months, in her desk drawer now. Not because she needs to hold it close anymore, but because it reminds her of what she was fighting for when everyone told her to give up. Every October, on the anniversary of the incident, Nora and Cora meet at the corner of Birchfield and Route 9. Stand where it happened. Remember the day everything changed because one girl refused to let a child die, and another girl's father understood that protection is sacred. The corner looks the same. Hardware store. Traffic light. Cars passing. Normal Wednesday afternoon in small-town America. But there's a difference now. A small plaque mounted on the brick wall of Dempsey's Hardware. In honor of Nora Jean Calloway, who taught us that courage doesn't look like what we expect. Sometimes it looks like someone everyone else stopped seeing. If this story moved you, subscribe to this channel. Share it with someone who needs to remember that protective people still exist. Real ones, not movie heroes. Real humans who choose courage over comfort. Comment below and tell me, who was your protector when you needed one? Or what do you wish someone had done when you were invisible? Because these stories matter. Not for the algorithm, not for the views, but because somewhere right now, there's another Nora sitting on another street corner, wondering if anyone will ever see her, if anyone will ever fight for her, if she matters enough to be saved. She does. You do. We all do. And sometimes all it takes is one person choosing to kneel instead of film, to act instead of watch, to be Sandra taking off her jacket, to be Jake refusing to leave, to be the one who doesn't walk away. This is Nora Jean Calloway's story. This is what 163 Hell's Angels proved about Brotherhood. This is what happens when someone finally looks, really looks, at the people we've trained ourselves not to see. The ending? The ending is Nora wearing sneakers that don't squeak anymore, walking across a graduation stage, applying to colleges, laughing with her sister, living instead of just surviving. The ending is Cora Martinez, alive, healthy, thriving, because a homeless girl knew that saving children matters more than staying safe. The ending is 17 names being investigated instead of buried. 5 still missing, but 12 found. 12 kids who learned that someone cared enough to look. The ending is proof that the scariest-looking people in a room can have the gentlest hearts. That brotherhood is an action, not a word. That protecting the vulnerable is the highest calling. Subscribe, share, speak up. Be the person who doesn't walk past. Be someone's Hell's Angels. Because Nora needed someone to see her. And eventually, someone did, and that made all the difference.